Hi, everybody, and welcome to AOP Digital Outcomes 2024. I'm Philip Ideson, and I'm one of your three co-hosts today for today's really digital event, which is all around kind of looking at digitalization and digital transformation, and how can we actually use that to drive outcomes as opposed to it not just being about the technology itself, because really here in procurement, we want to be driving outcomes for our organization. So that is really the theme of today's event. Now, I want to thank you all for joining us today. We're really excited by the number of registrants that we had, and hopefully, as we go through the next 3.5 hours, you're able to learn a lot of different things from really a diverse set of speakers, but also maybe there's things that you are looking for, how other organizations are working, or some insights and inspiration. I think we have that covered all the way through our activities today. Now, before I bring Kelly onto the stage, I do want to also thank Airbase and Lavinia AI for sponsoring today's event. Without the support of our partners, events like this and all the time that goes into creating events like this wouldn't be possible. So I do want to thank those up front. And now, with that said, welcome Kelly to the stage, and thank you for joining me as one of our co-hosts today.
Absolutely. It's interesting. There's such a planning process that goes into creating any one of these events. And then you come down to it's 10 minutes before it's time for the 10-minute login. And you're thinking, okay, are we ready? But it's interesting how different even the agenda looks now from where it looked when we started sort of mapping it out. And I know for me, I come to digital outcomes and I think, okay, what are the top digitally driven topics that procurement needs to be focused on, thinking about? But this morning, as we were getting ready to come in, I was actually thinking, okay, that's the big picture. But the more focused picture that I think the story we're going to tell today through all of these sessions is the outcomes piece. And so it'll be really interesting to get everybody's input and engagement as we go through the day. We'll review this with everybody in each session, but just giving you sort of a basic orientation to the screen. Up the right-hand side, you'll see the chat. We're so glad that you're with us. Let us know where you're joining from. The moderator in each session will be keeping an eye on that. And so unlike traditional webinars where you might hold 5 minutes at the end of a session for Q&A, we're going to bring you right in live as we go. So share your comments, share your questions. You also have an emoji button down the bottom if you want to give any of our speakers an applause. We certainly welcome that at any point as we go through the day. But really, we have a packed agenda. We're covering AI, of course. We'll be talking about data security. We'll be talking about customer experience. And so things that have been part of procurement's purview for a long time, just with sort of that digital orientation around how do we deliver against them.
Yeah, and this is an exciting time, I think, for procurement, because for those of us who have been in the profession for many, many years as practitioners before, we kind of dreamed of the ability to do some of the things that we're now being able to do because the technology that was available, it wasn't available before. Now it's almost like the hardest thing is to actually make sense of all the different opportunities, because it can get really overwhelming with all the different choices and knowing what to do and being worried about, well, the next generation, that's when that comes out, is that going to trump what the current technology is?
Exactly. So we want
to cover and talk a lot about that, as well as how you start trying to make some of these decisions on your technology roadmap with confidence. So I can't wait for today's sessions.
I know. Well, I think with that, Phil, I'm going to go ahead and let you drop, and I'm going to bring in our very first speaker of the day. We'll see you in about an hour. But let's go ahead and kick off our first speaker session of Digital Outcomes. I'm going to be joined by Heather Murray. She's the director at Beasting Digital, and in that role, she offers AI coaching and training for non-techies. So our focus of this very first session, I think it's a great place to start, is sort of straight talk, no buzz, no nonsense about the potential for AI in business, and more specifically within procurement. And we were joking backstage, Heather, before we got started today, that there's been so much general buzz around AI that we're all sort of in this situation where we're thinking, okay, I'm being asked about it, I'm interested in it, we're maybe talking about it a little bit, but I know there's so much I don't know. And so I'm thrilled, given that this is your area of specialty, to have you with us to kick off Digital Outcomes.
Thank you very much for having me. And I think those foundations of AI knowledge can really empower people. I think that's where a lot of people are. They've dabbled, but they're not entirely sure what AI actually is and how they can use it in their everyday work. So my thing is about, AI for non-techies. I don't use any technical terms. I don't use any jargon. A lot of people will be relieved to hear I'm not from a technical background. I'm an agency owner. So yeah, I'll happily take you through some foundations of AI and how it can be used in procurement.
I love that. Let's let the stage with a judgment-free zone, right?
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that you don't necessarily come from a tech background. I'd love to get a little bit of context on how you found yourself being focused on that. What was sort of your professional path that brought you to this moment where you're helping those of us who are not quite so techy figure out how to deal with AI at work?
Oh, absolutely. So around about 2 years ago, I was presented with a job for Centrica. So in my capacity as an agency owner, we had a really big contract come up, and they wanted to understand a little bit more about their audience. So they had a £10 million product that they were selling, and there's only 40 companies in the whole world that could afford it, and had very, very specific contacts at those companies. And no matter how many doors they knocked, they just weren't being opened, and they really struggled. And I looked at what they were doing, and I thought it was really broad, the way they were segmenting their audience down. There was nothing personal about what they were doing. So I started to look at all the different options available. And I came across something called Crystal Knows, which was actually, there are more newer versions of this technology now, but this was 2 years ago, which is a lifetime in AI. And it was a hyper-personalization tool. So it collected all of the digital breadcrumbs, they're called, all of these little facts about a person from all over the internet, pulled it all together and created this playbook, a personality analysis using DISC, and lots of different other facts about them, the language that they'll respond to, how to email them. And it was like a book of absolute gold for us. It was incredible. And off the back of that, we raised we got £75 million worth of pipeline for them, which equated into, I think it was £30 million worth of sales in the end.
Wow.
So they were really happy. We were really happy as a small agency, and my love for AI was then born. I think skip forward to November 2022 when ChatGPT came out. And I thought, absolutely incredible. This is something, this conversational AI, you no longer have to be a technical person to do all these incredible things. And it made me very excited. So I immersed myself for quite literally 3 hours a day, every single day, including Christmas Day. My partner
Oh my gosh.
I just became obsessed. I'm a little bit like that. And I just taught myself as much as I possibly could and decided to share what I've learned along the way. And it's snowballed since then.
Well, and we're certainly glad to be benefiting from that. One of the comments you made actually is interesting to me, and I want to ask you more about it. You said that 2 years is an eternity in the world of AI. Can you give us a sense of pace? I mean, I realize it's not like, okay, well, this is the 2024 AI, and then we're going to have the 2025. How should we think about the pace at which things are changing, just so that we know if this is somewhat peripheral to your role, is this a weekly thing we should be looking at, quarterly, annually? How do you generally talk about the rate of change?
It really depends on the type of AI you're using. So AI is this very broad umbrella term. And then within that, you have machine learning, which is the ability to use past data to create future strategies, and then deep learning, which is a lot more complex, and that's your kind of ChatGPT. And they use something called neural networks. I said I wouldn't use any jargon, and here's me using jargon. Neural networks based on neurons of the brain. Basically, it can understand a lot of data, but it really depends what your use case is. So if you're using it to I think when in procurement, say if you wanted to analyze a contract and to flag up risks for you, that type of technology within AI hasn't been moving as quickly as something like video generation. So kind of content creation tech is moving very quickly, and that is quite literally week on week. I would say to check in with that weekly will keep you ahead. But with I think more in this area of procurement, probably checking in once a month, having, working with innovators around you who actually really enjoy that type of thing, and having really good credible sources. There are podcasts, there are YouTube channels that if you sit down and you watch them, you will be up to date at the end. So yeah, I would say it's not moving quite as fast for your everyday use cases within procurement, but month on month is still pretty fast compared to technological advancements that we're used to at the moment.
Yeah. Now, do you find that it's progressing and advancing faster on the consumer side than it is the enterprise side, or is it early days enough that everybody is kind of learning from each other and moving forward together?
I think there's very little difference between the enterprise side and the consumer side at the moment. I think I've been working, so you'd imagine there'd be this huge difference, and there is maybe for some companies that are really far ahead, bigger enterprises that have gone AI first and developed their own tools already. But the vast majority of people, and I've worked with some big name enterprises, and they are in exactly the same position as small agencies with 2 or 3 people. Everybody's sitting there thinking, how do I get started with this? I need to understand enough to be able to talk in a meeting about it and understand what people are talking about, then understand what it can do just on a basic level, and then start to think about what it can do for me. So what can it do first, and then what can it do for me? How can I get my pains and solve them using AI? Or what's it good at? What's it bad at? I think there isn't much difference at the moment. Everybody's in this same place. It's a bit of a level playing field.
And that's actually really exciting for news for procurement in particular, because we sort of came to this point with enterprise buying software where everybody was coming to us in the organization and saying, but I use Amazon at home, right? And that's so easy and that's so intuitive. Why am I needing to be trained on this cumbersome thing? And we almost needed to get to a point of deliberate cross-product or collaboration where we said, okay, from an experiential point or a training point, what can we learn from some of these consumer-facing things? So maybe we've learned our lesson from that and are now getting the opportunity to all evolve together.
Yes.
Now, one of the other things I'd be interested to know is, are there any common misconceptions that people tend to have about AI? If you're just picking up little peripheral snips of information here and there, it's not part of your professional focus. Are there some common things that you find that either people don't know or that there are sort of, just misunderstandings out there about the technology?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a few of them, but I think one of the main ones is that it's a one-click solution. So people are imagining we're going to buy this tool, invest in it, and you press one button and you get everything you need out of it. And it's not the case. I think so many people expect that. They try it and they press it and they go, oh, the result isn't very good. This isn't what I expected.
It's supposed to be magic.
Yeah, it's supposed to be magic. And I think some tools feel like magic at first, but when you actually use them practically, they're not. You still need that human element to it. So I think with AI tools, first of all, it augments talent that pre-exists. It amplifies real talent. So you have to have AI tools in the hands of somebody who knows what good looks like in the first place. So you need to be able to describe accurately what you want, and then recognize at the other side, once you've done your prompting or your input or you press your buttons, whether that is good. So recognize what good looks like at the other side as well. Often AI will take you 60 or 70% of the way, and that is the beauty of it. It's going to save you time. It's going to optimize your processes, but it's not going to do everything for you. So if you're expecting to invest in a tool and this is another big misconception, is that you can replace people with it, you'd be really, really sorely mistaken. And I think a few businesses have made that mistake recently with thinking they can recreate entire teams using AI. We might be able to in future. We certainly can't yet.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that procurement is always thinking about, but I think we're especially sensitive to after the last few years, is any risk that something new opens us up to. I mean, risk has always been part of our purview, but with the supply chain disruptions and things that we've gone through over the last years, it does stand to reason that we should be looking at this and saying, okay, for all the potential and all the excitement, are there any things that we should be concerned about? And I know you've been collaborating with a lawyer who specializes in technology. And so I'd be interested to hear some of what you've learned and seen about maybe AI-related legal implications, just some of those things that either questions procurement should be asking, things we should be thinking about from a contractual or risk aversion standpoint. Where does some of that come into the process?
I think there's some huge risks legally. I think first one is intellectual property. So if it's with AI, it's trained on data, other people's data. It does not have original thought. So it's getting billions and billions of other pieces of content, mixing them all around, trying to pull out the right things and giving it back to you. So who owns that? Who owns that? And particularly when it comes to kind of generative AI, when we're talking about text being generated or images being generated, there's no clear answer quite yet. There's a lot of court cases in the pipeline trying to get through and trying to create an answer.
Oh, interesting.
But intellectual property is definitely a huge one, because if you create something, if you create a contract, do you truly, something completely using AI, do you completely own that or not? I think data protection is another big one too. So few people know, when you start to use these off-the-shelf products, a lot of these companies we've never heard of before as well. So they've just come to market really quickly. Some of them are just people sat in their offices and in their home office, and they've just built this product and they've gone, okay, let's get this to market, and it's out and everybody's really excited. And they've, I spoke to HeyGem, one of the biggest AI tools recently, and they started off really small and they snowballed really quickly, and they thought, oh my God. So these tools have come to market very quickly. So can we trust them with our data? So they might say your data is private, is it? And also being aware that actually with a lot of tools, I say ChatGPT, I keep on using the example, but it is a good all-rounder, that when you put something into ChatGPT, it is used to train that system. So it's everything you put in, everything you upload is then on the system, and can technically, it's not likely to, but it can actually come out somewhere else. So being aware of that, I think trusting sort of bigger brands, this is where bigger brands will win. I think there are a lot of sort of, when it comes to enterprise versus kind of smaller tools, you're going to trust those enterprise names a lot more. They're a lot slower and a lot less innovative, but they've got that trust factor that if they say your data is going to be treated well, then it probably will be, we hope. So that's another big factor. I think employment law is something that came up quite a lot as well. So job displacement, it will, if you have three people, I'm saying it won't replace people, but if you do have posters that aren't actually contributing in any particular way, it's going to start to illuminate those people as well. So when it comes to employment law, something we spoke about, it was mainly UK based, what we spoke about, but how is that going to affect your employees and their rights? And then contract law was another one that I thought would be quite an interesting one, particularly here. So if AI is creating the content and the contract, and then AI is reading the contract, how is that a legal contract at the end? Because nobody has understood it. So nobody has digested it. So I think there's so many different risks to think about. There's probably another 10 more, but they're the main ones that I thought would probably be most relevant for today.
Well, and it does seem interesting, and I know every organization has sort of their own timeline. Some companies are already doing controlled pilots. Some companies have bits of AI that are sort of baked into other proven tools that they've been using. But it does seem like largely this should be a time for thinking and learning. I find it interesting, even that in talking about something that's so tech-based, that we're talking about trust. It's very human. I mean, machines can validate, they can check, they can audit, but trust is sort of uniquely human because it suggests that there's a little something beyond the fact. When procurement starts to approach AI, and so, okay, we've learned some basics, we can have a decent conversation, ask some questions. What would you suggest around the thought process or the mindset if we're approaching either an opportunity where we're saying, okay, we're going to evaluate this to see if it's an appropriate place to incorporate AI in our tech stack, or if we're faced with a problem, to decide, okay, is AI a potential solution for this problem? Beyond the technology, how should we be thinking about those situations?
Absolutely. So there's a framework that I've written, which I think will be quite useful. I can send it to you afterwards to send out to attendees.
Awesome.
It might be quite useful. So the first step is to identify the problems. So start with your pains and challenges. So look at your processes and where are the weak points. So I think lots of people are really taking it the wrong way. So they see thousands of shiny tools. You'll get an email through and it promises the world. I think there's an awful lot of really good copywriting going on these landing pages for AI tools as well. They all sound incredible. So there's a lot of AI overwhelm as well. So if you start with the tool, you're going to get quickly overwhelmed. I would recommend starting first of all with the pain, and gather feedback, ask your stakeholders, what they think as well. So start with that problem, and then you have a list of your problems and think, right, okay. Then set your goals as well. So what would you like to achieve with AI? It's not capable of doing everything. So you need to align your use of AI with your actual strategy as well, and your goals within your role and as a business as well. Otherwise, it can kind of veer off into its own thing and not really function in an optimal way. And then assessing your AI readiness is another thing as well. So data is absolutely crucial to all of this. Your data needs to be structured, it needs to be clean, it needs to be relevant. And for big enterprises to get AI ready, data is the very first place that you need to start, because AI is, you put your data into AI, the better the data that goes in, the better the results that you get. So you can have all of these, if you have all of this past data that's really relevant and really strong, you can make really strong decisions, data-backed decisions, in a conversational way, without ever needing a data scientist, apart from maybe to clean your data in the first place. And then evaluating your tech infrastructure as well, just making sure that what you've got can actually support what you're going to be using. So that's something I think people are making a bit of have made a few mistakes with, because if we were talking with legacy systems, using legacy systems, then it may not support what AI is. So there's a lot of AI first tools, and then there's tools that are integrating AI, and the efficacy of the existing tools that are integrating AI are not as strong as those that are AI first. They're really not. There's pros and cons to both. As I said, that brand trust is a massive pro tip, but it might not be set up in the correct way. So just evaluate that. And then looking for those quick wins as well. So in my agency, I integrated into everything, but it was just one tool. For me, it was recording our calls. So I had a note taker in there, AI note taker, and that produced transcripts. And those transcripts led to me being able to investigate pains and see new sales opportunities. And it was just a useful, really accurate recording of what had happened. And also some of them analysed body language as well, which is great for analysing sales pitches and client calls and supply calls and all of that sort of stuff. It's really useful. So look for those quick wins in that little tool that could solve that little pain, to feel what it's like to integrate AI. And then, of course, cultivating that innovation too is really important. So change management is huge here. People are fearful for their jobs. They're scared. Yes. They're very resistant. A lot of people are very cynical about AI. I get told many times a week that it's a fad, it's a passing fad. And I think, it's absolutely not. It's definitely not. There's so much going into it. There's a lot of angry people as well. I'm on LinkedIn a lot talking about AI, trying to be helpful. But I do get a lot of people coming back going, how dare you bring this in? And you're trying to encourage people to be replaced by robots. And there's just a lot of misinformation. So I think change management and finding those innovators, those people that are interested in this naturally, is really important too for kind of AI task forces. And then implementation and monitoring. So beginning with pilot projects, test and learn with those small projects as you would with anything else, and track the performance of it as well. So going through those steps, I think, is a good way to start. So the main thing is beginning with the problem and not with the tool.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you talk about the copywriting on some of the tool sites. I would love to know, I guess I still consider myself a writer, how much of that copy was written by AI and how much of it was written by people. We'll never know the answer, but it certainly does make everything sound fairly glowy. I think that's where a lot of those, on the one hand, magical expectations come from, and on the other hand, worries about the robots are coming to take our jobs. In fact, I was just recently talking to a procurement executive who was talking about maybe doing some early pilots or testing some platforms that have AI. And he was talking about the challenge associated with figuring out what's hype and what's real, because everything sounds good. And especially if we only know so much based on firsthand experience. Are there any, we made this a judgment-free zone. We said no buzzwords. Are there any tips you can offer? What's something that might suggest maybe a product isn't 100% baked, or what's something a little bit buzzwordy? Are there any ways from websites especially that we can start to separate what's tested, what's proven, what's hopeful, what's hype, so that as we go in, we've sort of pre-narrowed down our pool of options to things that are actually viable should we decide to test them?
So I would absolutely love to be able to give a straight answer here and a list of things to look for, but it is all so new. It's really difficult to do that. It's a real problem. There are no trust sites. There are no review sites that are valid. There's something called There's an AI for that, which has a review facility, but nobody's really using it. And it's a good place to find new tools, but that would be starting with the tool and not the pain. So if you are looking around for something specific, it's a good place to find things. But I have found that the review facility on there isn't very strong. I think it's one of the biggest problems that's out there at the moment is not being able to see, as I say, first of all, I would say that landing page copy for those tools is definitely human. AI is not that good at copywriting yet.
Hooray!
But I think demos, it's got to be demos. So actually looking at what it does. Word of mouth is going to be huge as well. I keep, because of this big problem, I keep a very straightforward spreadsheet, and I call sort of, you must remember as well with these tools, so they're coming out to market really quickly, but they might be incredible in a few months' time because it's moving so quickly. True. So I have this thing. So if I go onto it and I can see that you can see very quickly whether it's going to be useful or not. So if it's decent, I will keep it and think, right, okay, I might go forward and give that a proper trial. If it has potential, I'll review it again in a few months' time. So I'll keep it there because sometimes it might have a glitch, but people are working very quickly to improve glitches now. It's not things aren't as they used to be. Whenever there's a problem on something like ChatGPT, it's fixed with 10 brand new features within a couple of weeks. So being aware of that is really important. So don't be put off by glitches. But there are some really talented people that might not present themselves as well as some of the big brands, but they've got much better products. So unfortunately, I'm not able to give you a very straight answer with that one, other than speak to people and watch those demos, because they're all doing demos. That's something they all do, and just check that that's relevant. And their customer service is really good because they're all trying to outdo each other as well. So make the most of that. Sorry, it's not a better answer.
No, but I think it's a fair answer, right? And that's where we are, that the challenge becomes, and this is something procurement is very familiar with, not necessarily in the sense of artificial intelligence, but we're always sort of on the smell test team, right? Okay, are these claims that sort of sound too good to be true, really too good to be true? Is there a way we can get a sample? Is there a way we can get a demo or tour a facility? Are most people at this point working with third parties, or have you had any contact, especially with really large companies that are sort of testing, should we build our own versus should we go out of house? Is it predominantly a third party market now, or is there really any in-house experimentation going on?
I think that there's a lot, particularly I work with a lot of big law firms, and they're doing a bit of experimentation, but I've found that they've run before they can walk with it. So they've custom built at great expense their own AI tools before knowing what they really want. So they've done the tool before the pain problem, the pain situation. So I think starting with those off-the-shelf third-party tools is absolutely the best way to go. Because you can, again, finding out about AI's capabilities is really important. And then when you find it, because all these tools have limitations, so learning something, and this is what I've been in, because I use probably 10, I've tried hundreds, but I use probably 10 AI tools on a daily basis. I know where their limitations are. I can go to this point over here, and I can go to this point over here. But if I wanted to build a custom tool, it would be something that would do this very specific job. So therefore, I'd be able to give a much better brief to an AI developer, saying I wanted to do this specific thing, and here's an example of where it was going up to at this point. So I absolutely think that everybody should be starting with those tools, and those that haven't, maybe it hasn't worked out too well for them, not across the board, but the people that I've been speaking to.
Now, the other thing I'm interested in, and this actually mirrors something else we've already been through in a form in procurement. So in the past, we went through the shift where everything was originally behind the company's own firewall, right, on servers. And then everything became software as a service and went into the cloud. And there was sort of like an uncomfortable teenagey time from a software perspective where you had solutions built to be in the cloud from day one, operating one way, and solutions that had migrated to keep up with things working in another. Have you observed any differences between platforms and solutions that are built now from day one on AI, even if it was rudimentary early AI, versus platforms and things that have existed for a long time that are trying now to work and bake AI in. Any observations around how those two situations are working differently?
Yeah, well, what ones that I'd say that pre-existing platforms using AI, they can struggle, as I said before, with that sort of legacy systems, and they're kind of plonking AI into the top, and it doesn't quite work. I think there's a lot of tools. I think we saw a big influx of them not that long ago, over the last sort of 6 months, of people go now with AI, and you go, oh, great. And you go on and
now better tasting.
Yeah, that's it. I think LinkedIn is a really good example. They said, oh, we'll use AI to rewrite your posts so they're worse. I think that's what I use, as somebody who absolutely loves LinkedIn. I thought, oh, an AI tool, and it rewrites it in the most terrible way. It's like it doesn't understand itself. It's not being programmed properly.
Wow.
And that's a really good example of it not working. They just wanted to do something that had AI because that's the trend. But as I say, they have their user base, they have that trust, which is really, really important when selecting things. So I think as things go, as things progress, you're going to have you're going to have better AI tools. The thing is, when they're bigger companies and they're pre-existing, there's a lot more red tape to them innovating and being flexible.
True.
So it takes longer for them. Some of these advances are happening. The things that happened last week in AI were mind-blowing. And then this week, again, we've got new tools. Yeah. If you want to stay ahead with the latest thing, you need to be quick. So these smaller businesses are actually at a massive advantage because they can be really flexible and really innovative. And something comes out, a new version of GPT, for example, they can have that on their software. And that's what people, innovators are thinking. I want that very latest version. But with those new AI first companies, there's a massive learning curve as well, isn't there? So they don't have the trust. They do need to get people, you're willing to learn with an established big company that's adding AI, but with a new one, it's that, who are you and why should I listen to you? Why should I bother to do your tutorials? And I think there's kind of pros and cons to both.
Yeah. And I certainly were in some ways. I think we saw this as consumers with the development of app stores. I have a feeling we're going to find out in retrospect that a few of these companies were started by 16-year-olds in bedrooms and nobody knew, right? But it's so accessible and they're so native. Exactly. Heather, one last question for you before we start to wind down our time. We talked a lot about pace and time today. And, you talked about the fact that, depending on your involvement, maybe sort of a monthly check-in. What's the latest? What's going on? If we try to take a step back, I think a lot of us were really just finding out, especially about generative AI in early 2023. And now we're a couple of months into 2024. Can you give us the very high level, what is sort of the general difference between how AI is impacting business in terms of being piloted, implemented, adopted even in 2023 versus where you think 2024 is likely to go?
Absolutely. So I think 2023 was the year of the dabbler. So people dabbled. We all heard about it and we're all intrigued, and there is no barrier to us trying it, particularly with, again, ChatGPT. So we were able to just bring this up, and within 2 seconds we've signed in and we can interact like a human, and that was exciting for us. So we can play around, and then that then has this other knock-on effect of, I've got that's interesting for now. I'm not sure what it can do and what use it is, but it's fun. I'm going to try this other thing. And you try this other thing, and you think, so we're dabbling around, but we're not actually integrating. Mm-hmm. I think 2024 is the year that we actually integrate and start to create workflows. So instead of using individual tools, people are going to start to learn that tools stacked with each other help a lot. So, for example, I talked about using an AI note taker. I would record my calls with my Sybil, an AI note taker. Then I would use something like Claude, which is a version of ChatGPT. Well, it's not a version of it. It's a similar thing to ChatGPT, sure, but it's better for human-sounding content. So I would stack those two things together to get the results that I want. And then I might use ChatGPT to edit the results. And so using those three ones, so people are going to start to realize the capabilities and the limitations of the main tools that are out there and start to integrate. I think this is the year of actually integrating and trialing and experimenting. I think that's a really exciting next step, because I've seen people cycle through these processes quickly. They're more natural innovators. They've done the dabbling. They're kind of in the integration, and the next point is the kind of the stacking after that.
Yeah. Well, guilty as charged on the dabbling. I know when ChatGPT first came out, we spent several weeks at Art of Procurement having our podcast show notes rewritten in the voice of a pirate. That was
Yes.
endlessly entertaining for several weeks. But no, now the serious business begins of, okay, we know there's an advantage to be had here. We just need to figure out how do we preserve the things that need to be human while leveraging the advantages that technology offers us. Heather, you promised us no buzzwords and some straight talk AI. You've definitely delivered. Thank you so much for spending this first session of Digital Outcomes 2024 with us.
My pleasure. It's any excuse to talk about AI is fine with me.
Excellent. And of course, thank you for everybody who joined us live, who's watching on demand. This will be our first 5-minute break of the day. On the other side of the break, our next session will be what you need to know about the second P in P2P. That'll be moderated by my colleague, Helen McKenzie, and it will feature Matt Schultz from Airbase. Thank you so much.